spent my life living the rules. I was brought up morally. My family was a strong one. My parents trusted me. I look to see the good in men, still do to some extent. But man is not infallible, and this law lacks common sense. In a land where crops abound, tell me honestly, how we gonna find all that earth unless we make the world concrete? And criminals with guns and knives, they used to break the peace. And the ones who are our peacemakers are too busy looking for a weed. I'm not saying break the law, my friends, but I'm American. We have the right to speak out loud about the things we need to change. Won't even let us study it to see its properties. Oh my no, they say it's so bad it'll bring you to your knees. When we're allowed to use for pain morphine and heroin, expensive drugs that bleed our soul, I honestly don't understand. Oh, how can we be so arrogant that we would change God's law? It says all plants and flower and herbs are here to help us all, and hemp alone can fill our needs without petroleum. But DuPont and the pharmacies don't want that to happen. All DuPont and the pharmacies don't want that to happen. I'm not saying break the law, my friends, but I'm American. We have the right to speak out loud about the things we need to change. And in a time of bridges, how can it ever be that we are on opposing sides in this land of liberty? When we're allowed to use our hearts as free citizens, we have the right to speak out loud about the things we need to change. I'm not saying break the law, my friends, but I'm American. We have the right to speak out loud about the things we need to change. We have the right to speak out loud about the things we need to change.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Sustainable Resolution. I am Dr. Milton Bird. I'm the host of this television show, and tonight I have with me Christopher McCullum. He's co-hosting this evening with me on this wonderful evening. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in, and I also want to thank Virginia Waite, the original artist on this song, I Am an American, which we just got a chance to listen to. Jenny is a local artist, often seen in street performing around Asheville. She's very talented, and we thank her for that opportunity. We want to introduce you to the Sustainable Resolution. This is our first television show, and we're going to be live for the next 6 months if URTV is still on air. The issue here is sustainability. The Sustainable Resolution And I'm going to pick up a piece of paper here to kind of give a bit of a layout to what that really means for us to take a look at here. As defined by Webster's Dictionary, to be able to be sustainable is to build up, support, to keep up, maintain, such as we need to sustain their interests, to supply with nourishment, and that's another point of view we will get into in sustainability, to support the spirits, courage, or resolution of, and I consider that an American spirit and the human spirit. To withstand, endure, such as to sustain a disappointment, which nowadays we have a lot of. To undergo, suffer, such as sustained an injury, which every human being right now is going through. To uphold as valid, true, or legal, and that will be part of our focus in this journey through understanding sustainability. To corroborate, to confirm, and I'll give you some synonyms: bolster, to buoy, prop, support, uphold. Now, that's all about sustainability. Now, what about resolution? Resolution, that's firm determination. The act of resolving to make or cause to make a firm decision to find a solution. Something resolved, especially a decision or an expression of opinion, adopted by a deliberate body, such as our elected officials. A solving as of a problem. You know, I like to quote Conrad Hilton here: success seems to be connected with action. Successful people keep moving, they make mistakes, but they don't quit. That's an American spirit, and I think that's the indomitable human spirit. So Chris, we're here this evening to talk and connect on this issue of sustainability. Now, there's many ways we can look at it: economically, sociologically, agriculturally, spiritually. I'm going to give you a chance to step in right now and give kind of your opinion on what sustainability is all about.
I think sustainability is all about having the resilience in a local community to support ourselves. Of course, those who have watched me with Dixie on what's really happening in Western North Carolina have heard me preach about sustainability a number of times over the past couple of months, and this is something that I've become incredibly interested in over the past couple of years, especially over the past 12 months or so. And the way that I see it is it's all about providing security for ourselves. As the world gets smaller and smaller, it gets further and further apart, communities do, in my opinion. We've become so reliant on outside communities, on outside factories, outside distilleries, outside mills, outside everything. Everything that we consume comes from somewhere else. I think we need to get to the point where we are consuming things that comes from here, just in case there's a breakdown in infrastructure, or even if it's just about maintaining that local community pride. There's a lot of different things that go into it, in my opinion. And I, for one, I fear an infrastructure breakdown at some point in time, the way the economy is going. I definitely don't want to be waiting on a loaf of bread that comes from 8 different parts of this country, none of them from Western North Carolina.
You know, you hit something there, very important: fear.
Oh, absolutely.
Right now, all over the world, we are having fears over many issues. And the only way you can deal with a fear like this is to move through it. That's part of being sustainable, to have that firm determination, that resolution to find a solution. That's part of what the purpose of this program is to help and focus on solutions, local, regional, nationally, internationally, globally. You know, it all starts right here, where we live, home.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that really you have to look at is what's going on in current planning. Here locally, we have our regional government. The Council of Government has a number of initiatives, what I call top-down planning, underway. At the same time, we have got to get ourselves to the process where we're doing it from the grassroots up to meet and be interdependent with those potentially wonderful local government, regional government planning, state level as well. We have not gotten to that interdependence yet, that interaction of planning, and unfortunately the time is now. We can't wait another 5 years. We don't have that timeline. So here, now, today, we are going to create this process, and we're going to bring it into focus of the here and now for community planning and community focus. That will be part of the show's developmental future. This is show number 1. Also, on one of the things that I'm going to have on the show is the discussion of medical cannabis and industrial hemp. Why? First off, it is time for laws to change in regards to medical cannabis because it is AMA supported. It is recognized in the medical community as the next step in understanding appropriate medical best practice. And the endocannabinoid system is a subject of great research right now, and myself as a past medical professional and civic leader and all that, I have a great personal concern for my own health because it is best practice for my medical condition. I am testifying that as an anecdotal evidence, but we'll also look at the scientific evidence, and we're going to have some discussion of that later in today's show. But going back here, let me check our time reference. We're looking good here, 12 minutes into the show. And being this is first show, I want to confirm our timeline here on our outline. This will be a call-in show, so if Lisa, if you'll put up that call-in number, we are inviting people to call in and talk and interact with us on any point of view, and I do mean any because this television station is about freedom of speech, First Amendment rights of the United States Constitution, and its public access. So Americans speak out. Let's see, let me do a review here. There is something currently in Raleigh called the Medical Cannabis Act. It's called House Bill 577. We're just briefly going to touch on it this evening because it is an 18-page document that has just been recently sponsored and numbered. That's why the new House Bill 577. This is the next step from House Bill 1380 with some revisions to it. Also, we want to talk about industrial hemp. You know, one of the most unique things about Asheville is we have the hemp houses. We have this construction organization that has taken construction to a whole new level with constructing with hemp. And it is appearing to be an exceptional construction approach. We hope to have more discussion in the near future about that. But the industrial hemp is an economic development tool that's yet to be tapped for this region, for the state, across this country. And my 3 favorite Americans said, "Americans, go grow hemp." That was George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Benjamin Franklin. We also recognize that back in the start of the American history, hemp was the sustainable economic crop. World War II, we actually had federal government laws that required people to grow hemp because of the war effort. There is an outstanding history in regards to this plant and its use in the human event. Chris, tell me some of your thoughts about medical cannabis.
I think it's absolute necessity. It's something that people have used for uncountable generations, and it's only been since the early 1900s with the whole reefer madness ordeal that it started being frowned upon in this country and others around the world as well. And it's I absolutely do not agree with any form of prohibition. I think prohibition is set to be an economic and social killer no matter what it's prohibiting, because all it's doing is
Criminalizing?
criminalizing.
Excuse me
yes.
for putting that in your mouth, but
Well, it's what I was looking for, so thank you very much for putting that in my mouth. But I think it's something that needs to be taken a look at. It has been looked at multiple times in multiple jurisdictions around the country for the past 30, 40 years, and it's been there's been a tug of war between state jurisdictions, local jurisdictions, and federal jurisdiction out in California, out in various other states, whether it be Oregon, whether it be Virginia, Arizona, Nevada, all over the place. There's been these tug of wars going on. tug of wars, whatever.
I'll call it political manipulation. No, maybe we'll find better words for that. But
as the show goes on, we'll figure it out.
yes,
But I think it's something that is absolutely necessary. It should have a long, hard look taken at it, and I definitely think that there should be a lot of support for it.
well, talking about support, I think there really is a very strong grassroots support, and I want to thank WLOS for their recent survey on cannabis, medical cannabis. Let me clarify that. Medical cannabis. Over 50% of the call-ins for that poll was in favor of medical cannabis. And we do have a call-in, so please be our first caller and welcome.
Thank you. I would just like to know if you could elaborate more on the industrial hemp.
Well, actually, we want to do that significantly. Our preparation for this show here is really about our introduction. Industrial hemp has been used for clothing fiber. Actually, you can find hemp clothing right here in Asheville. Matter of fact, one of the, I think Tiffany, what's Tiffany's last name, and her product, can we say her product line?
She's with Green on Green. She's the co-host for Green on Green show that airs on Saturday from 5 to 5:30.
Yes, that's one example of hemp clothing, and we have a local entrepreneur that's involved in that. Well, rope is made of hemp. Canvas, the word canvas comes from cannabis, just so you know in history that back in the early 1800s, cannabis was one of the major products of the United States. We still use cannabis today. And gosh, there's so many products that we're looking at. Hemp oil, which is a nutritional aspect. The hemp seed, I'll use that for industrial. It is the most nutritional seed recognized in today's scientific literature in regards to nutrition. And there is matter of fact, I can look over here and pull up the United States patent on number 6630507, U.S. patent, dated October 7th, 2003. Cannabinoids as antioxidants and neuroprotectants. I bring out the antioxidant part of it because there is a nutritional component that someday. Am I answering your question? Oh, we have another call. Well, for the last caller, thank you. I hope I answered your question. Next caller, please.
Yeah, you're a doctor. I wanted to find out if I've read stories on the internet, actually seen a video where a gentleman had cancer on his face and it actually cured the cancer. Do you think that's possible?
Well, one of the reasons they need to shift from a Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 is to further research like that. The anecdotal evidence says yes to your question. The double-blind scientific investigation study format has not been conducted yet. I hope we get to that soon because from what evidence is out there, again, I'm going to reaffirm this, yes. Are you still there, caller?
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate that because I just wanted to, you see a lot of things on the internet, but you have to filter through a lot of stuff to find something that reinforces what's there.
Well,
I just want to call in and ask you that question.
I'm glad you did, and we need further research to validate those perspectives, and I really hope, that the promise of endocannabinoid systems and the cannabinoids that function in the human body can have breakthrough in regards to cancer research. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
And you have a good evening. That does bring up quite a point right there. Our health it needs to have a sustainable quality which every citizen can have their hands available to, meaning having a hands-on approach to their own quality of health. When you look at today's medical practice, it is patient-physician relationship, but all too often the patient seems to be second step or second nature to what is being dictated to them by healthcare. we have got a lot of reform work to do in healthcare reform to bring it back to patient-centered, patient-oriented healthcare. And this is part of sustainability. You know, your quality of life being sustainable in regards to health. Thoughts, comments?
I think there needs to be some kind of reform as well. This is not something that I'm incredibly well versed in, so
Well,
let the expert handle that. I'm going to keep my mouth shut before I make a fool of myself.
yes, but here you bring out a very important point. We all need to learn and understand this stuff, not let just the medical professionals, because it's our quality of life. It is the people who need this knowledge and understanding so they can make the best informed decisions they can with their physicians and healthcare professionals. It really is a living relationship from patient and physician and healthcare professionals. We've got to reinforce that type of nurturing and healthcare reform. And I've had lots of discussions with professionals about how we're going to move in that direction. Further discussion down the road on that subject. Wow. And you know, there's a lot of wow factors going on here. This is a time of change in the American society and the global culture of humanity, trying to look and reframe how we interact and how we devise and plan and create our future, from everything from sustainability to spiritual equality. Let's see where we can pick up some of this. Lisa, can we shift over here to our camera? I'm going to remove the American flag right here and briefly begin touching upon this. Now, before I get into talking about cannabis-based management, I know Chris is going to have to be leaving us shortly because he has another show to go and prepare for, what's really going on in Western North Carolina. And I've had the privilege of being on that show with Dixie and Chris, and I am quite honored to have had that. So Chris, when you need to go, thank you, my man, and I just wanted to extend that before we get into this other subject.
Definitely happy to help you break in the studio. And we got another call. You're popular tonight.
We have another caller. Please go ahead.
Hi. I wonder if doctors in North Carolina can prescribe medical marijuana.
No, they cannot prescribe it. They can. Only thing they are allowed to do is a letter of recommendation, and that's effective in all 50 states, but they cannot prescribe. That's one of the reasons why changing the law and establishing a medical framework for medical cannabis for the practicing, what's the term in the House bill? Bona fide. Let me use that word. Bona fide physicians to prescribe that medication. It is not available in North Carolina as of yet. Now, I bring a point up here. In some states where it's legal, yes, it is prescription-based, and even the Veterans Administration now is honoring those prescriptions in those legal states for veterans' health care services under specific medical diagnosis. Any other questions? Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did, because I thought that they could, but they were very reluctant to.
Well, let's move to the pharmaceuticals such as Marinol, also known as Dronabinol, and I have some documentation on that here, but I'll show that in the paperwork here in a bit. Getting those prescriptions because they're synthetic, that's what I'll call a gray area. The court system is yet to have that managed and interacted with the medical society here in North Carolina. It's an ongoing evolutionary process. Any other thoughts?
I know different people who use marijuana for medical purposes, and I've been afraid to try it because I've heard that there can be bacteria in it. Am I broaching a subject you'd rather not address?
Well, you're going to the standards of production. And let's face it, there is no regulatory industry and there's no standard of practice in the production of cannabis. What you see is what I call a shadow industry. It comes down to the integrity of the individual grower. Bacteria is really not the issue, fungus is the issue. And it has to do with the care and production of the finished product for smoking. In the early years of the tobacco industry, they had those problems too. And that industry developed more professional regulation and modeling of the production of the plant, and they've eliminated those fungal issues and those, what I'll call contamination issues. That will have to manifest in the maturity of such an industry in cannabis development and medication cannabis therapy.
I actually have a question related to that. What kind of health detriments is there a universal health detriment for fungal infections, or
yes.
What exactly is it for?
Yes. When you inhale, be it cigarette smoke or just airborne particles of fungal spores, you can breathe them into your lungs and you can get a fungal infection. I'll give you an example. It's called aspergillosis. Aspergillosis is basically fungus growing inside the lungs. And when fungus takes root, because the body has a very hard time identifying fungus, the immune system does not recognize it well. And as we get older, we tend to have more fungus in our body, and we have, for many sources, not just smoking. So I want the caller to recognize that it's not just a smoking-related issue, it's a healthcare issue in many forms.
Now, is that any more dangerous than the side effects we see listed on common pharmaceuticals, saying possible side effects include heart failure, death, stroke, massive amounts of blood loss, lose your head?
Are you still with us, caller?
Yeah. Would baking brownies take care of the fungus issue?
That's an interesting question. The cooking aspects, I would, actually defer that to a nutritionist, a registered dietitian, to give that answer. I suspect that most of the time it would, but not always. But I do not have the expertise to answer that question as well as I'd like to.
Okay, because I'm at a point that I really need relief, and yet I've always been against illegal drugs. And I'm really at a crossroads, so I appreciate all of your information.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you very much. And
Okay.
I do want to point this out that I cannot consider this as medical advice to you. It is discussion and...
It's just general information, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Going back to your point about losing your head...
Hyperbole right there. I've not actually seen the listed side effect as losing one's head, but with everything else that goes in there, possible side effects include death.
Well,
Seriously,
death is a possibility when it comes to fungal infections.
Okay.
If you've ever, I have seen this unwanted pleasure in open heart surgery, where you have a cauliflower type of structure growing on a heart valve, causing the valve to fail, and it looks kind of like cauliflower. And trying to excise that from the body in open heart surgery actually gives temporary relief, because once the body is infected with fungus, it's a very insidious process.
And it takes root, doesn't it? And
then
the roots keep spawning, yeah.
Well, the spores spread through the body. I mean, it travels by blood, by lymphatic system. Well, it's called the human event. Our bodies are in this biological world. Either we have a synergy in living with it, what's called commensalism, or it becomes parasitic, destructive, invasive. That's sepsis. You can have sepsis from bacteria, viruses, and even fungal. Those quite often are death sentences for a lot of people. And when someone survives sepsis, which I'm going to be having a young man on the show in a few weeks that has survived that, he's a quadriplegic. And we're going to talk about such issues in his journey through his medical experience, and also look at cannabis therapy as from his point of view. I actually was on a radio show this past Sunday evening. We're not supposed to mention those kind of names, all right? We can, okay. Asheville FM. It was a wonderful show, and I want to thank Matthew Bird for that. It's spelled B-U-R-D, not B-Y-R-D, because that's my last name, and it happens to be the same name as my son. Matthew was quite intelligent, quite interactive, and a real pleasure to work with on that radio show. And we had a young man, I can't say Noah's last name off the top of my head because it's kind of long, but he has an epilepsy history. And epilepsy is one of those categories that cannabis therapy is prescribed for in the legal states, recognized because it's a neuroprotectant.
What logical reason is there for there to be the regulation that prevents people from getting the kind of getting access to something that relieves them from their from pains, illnesses? Where's the logic in it? What is the root of the movement against it? Does it go back to the Prohibition era and just spawn from there?
It does. We're going to do some history review in the coming shows. When Prohibition first came about, we did not have scientific method of investigation for cannabis. It was still in the early stages of scientific development. And today, we have that scientific capacity in researching it. So back then, even though cannabis was the #1 medicine for the American Medical Association in prescription, it was all anecdotal evidence. Mm-hmm. And to come full circle on that, it's time. I have a series over here that we're going to get into talking about cannabis management for pain and give some direct answers to that. But I'm going to shift focus here and going back to sustainability.
Yeah.
Because we're going to spend lots of time talking about cannabis. Before we do that, though, we have another call-in, so thank you. Hello, caller.
Hey, doctor.
Yes.
Are you a lifelong believer, or when did you convert, and why did you convert to believe in the use of cannabis?
Okay, you want personal history, and I'm proud to do that. Back in the 80s, I had a severe accident at Mission Hospital doing CPR. And I had a disc rupture, explosively rupture in my neck, and do a 90% decapitation to the nerve root to the left side of my body, my upper body. And I immediately was paralyzed from that. And I had to go to surgery, and my neck was fused, and it left me with a chronic pain condition called neuropathic pain. Well, best practice of medicine back in the 80s, mid-80s, was the opioids, narcotics. And I went on them for a number of years, and I struggled with that. Boy, did I struggle with that. I went up to 318 pounds. There was depression that went along with the narcotic use, and I had a critical care practice to deal with where medication would interfere with judgment, and that's a very dangerous position to be in. I didn't like it. I immediately began trying to find ways to get out of that predicament because it was a cycle of destruction. And anybody who's been on narcotics for an extended period of time, find yourself going downhill no matter what you do because of those side effects. Well, in the late 80s, the research had already been started. I was beginning to learn about it, beginning to explore it. Dabbled a little bit like many people did of my age from back in the earlier years from college. And I remember back then I had a sense of well-being when I did occasionally use it. And I was not a regular cannabis user. I do not qualify as a pothead or have any kind of addiction issue because that's also part of my professional background. But I found out through gradual learning and understanding that cannabis actually was best practice. I actually have scientific literature here that I'll show that was presented at the World Health Congress this past August 2010 that cannabis is 10 times more effective than opioids for neuropathic pain management. It became a personal journey for me to find out what was best practice because I am not an easy person to convince. You have to go through a long justification and documentation for me to accept it. Well, I do accept it, and I have tried it, and I do want it as part of my personal health care management. I do not want to be abusive to it. I want to have appropriate use. Did I answer your question?
Very well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So going back to where, before we go to talk about this cannabis-based management of neuropathic pain, and I'm looking over to my left because this is where the documentation I'm going to be placing it for you to see. I want to go back to talking with Chris about sustainability. One of the things that's going on right now is called the transition movement. And while I can't promote the book that's written all about that, which was done by Rob Hopkins, a permaculturist from England, which has over 5,000 communities across the United States looking at this plan of action for sustainability. It's looking at how we go from this oil dependency into local resiliency. And that means we've got to reframe how we get our resources to maintain our quality of life, which is rapidly going downhill because of economic changes, and how to reframe it into not only surviving but thriving. So I'm going to be approaching, there is an organization here in Asheville called Transition Asheville. I'm going to be talking to the Land of Sky people for community planning, and we're going to be getting these people on the show and begin looking at this, looking at what sustainability means, how we go through transition from such things as oil dependency, because I understand by the end of summer, of course this is rumor right now, that gas is going to hit over $5 a gallon. I don't know anybody that can reasonably afford that with all the other economic price hikes that are going on.
I would have to say that eventually supply and demand is going to catch up to that, and demand is going to drop off due to the expensive prices, just like it did a couple of years ago when the oil bubble burst and prices per barrel of oil just basically bottomed out. It dropped almost $80, if I recall correctly. Gas goes from $3.50 down to about $2, a little bit under $2. I hope that's what's in store for us.
I hope so too, but we also got to recognize that the capitalistic approach is to push every opportunity for profit clearance out of those mechanisms. We've got a learning curve to go here. That glass bubble, that glass ceiling has shattered. And we've got to reframe capitalistic perspectives to balance out the quality of life for everyday citizens. So it can't be just the financial support of that elite capitalistic process. It's got to be a balanced, stable foundation economically, so that the hope you were just talking about really has an opportunity to take root and reestablish our quality of life.
And of course, a good way to assist with laws of supply and demand playing back into it is to develop alternative energy sources, which of course takes off the dependence from oil, which of course gas prices are related to oil, but oil is used in many, many, many applications around the world. Everything from pens, CDs, everything.
I mean,
tables made by oil.
Pharmaceuticals.
Absolutely everything is produced with the usage of oil. Using alternate energy, whether it be solar, hydroelectric, a whole variety of any other things, would reduce the dependency on oil and let that price stabilize again, as the way that I see it.
Well, that's a piece of the puzzle, and it'll take multiple resources to create the solutions we need.
Yeah, and unfortunately, from what I understand, the problem with sustainable energy, whether it be hydroelectric or solar, especially solar, is the problem is not the gathering of the power; it's the storing of the power. There's not a good way to store electricity, and so they're working on capacitors that will be able to do this.
Are you familiar with smart grid technology?
Not incredibly.
Okay, it's a new approach. One of the things that, as a civic leader at Land of Sky, I've been trying to talk about community planning built around what's called smart grid technology, where you have local energy production resources from the individual home to a collective community planning process, and it feeds back to a grid system. We already have one, but it's so outdated, it needs to be updated into what's called a smart grid, where power fluctuations peaks in demand, sunlight, no sunlight, have a way of feeding into a system and keeping it auto-regulated, like you were talking about earlier, where that auto-regulation is defined locally into a national grid system. And one of the things that I've talked with Dr. John Pine, the research director at the Appalachian State University for their technology for this kind of stuff, that to look at community planning at the local levels to create local regional models of how we get the smart grid system off the ground. Again, we're at cutting edge approach, and the unique opportunities to transform our society is amazing if we follow through from the grassroots level as well as top-down planning in local government. You know, right now there's a lot of planning going on from the federal government down to the state government, down to the regional government, and it's yet to get to the grassroots. But I look at Green Advantage, meaning of the Advantage West. They're trying to be that connection to the entrepreneurs to bring it home, so to say, where we start blending all this capacity to plan, grow, and interact, these kinds of new approaches that become sustainable and cost-effective and balancing out that supply and demand so that these high prices and costs become rebalanced. Mm-hmm. Any more thoughts in sustainability? Because I know you're about ready to
yeah, I actually do have to head on out of here in just a minute. I just think it's all down to individuals within their communities, working with their communities, and the number one priority is, of course, staying fed. In my opinion, the power can go out, but as soon as the cupboards are bare, we're going to have anarchy in the streets. It'll be total societal meltdown. So I think
going back to that fear again.
Absolutely,
yes.
there needs to be a movement right now, and there is, but there needs to be more involvement in it to become as sustainable with agriculture as possible. Whether it be turning a section of your yard into a so-called victory garden from World War II, all the way up to community gardens where multiple people come together on one plot of land.
Community-supported agriculture.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I think that's the number one key. And with that, I've got to sign on out of here, and I've got to go get prepared to do the other show that starts in 15 minutes.
It's been a real pleasure, Chris.
Thank you for having me on.
I'm looking forward to it again.
Absolutely.
Lisa, let's go ahead and shift over here to our cannabis-based management of neuropathic pain, evidence, rationale, and clinical reality in cannabinoid medicine. Cannabinoid medicine. I want people to understand that. Marijuana actually is a slang term that came from the movie called Reefer Madness. So even though we will use that word, the word I prefer is cannabis-based, cannabis therapy, and cannabis is actually the name of the plant that we know as marijuana. Now, in understanding cannabinoids, I'm going to turn myself here a little bit here to get comfortable. Cannabinoids, a series of botanical compounds and now synthetic compounds that has been identified in the body, which the brain and body does make. I think back to Scientific American magazine that actually in 2004 had an article quoting, I don't remember the authors off the top of my head, but the brain's own marijuana. An excellent article to read if somebody wants to begin understanding the fact that the human body makes cannabinoids organically to metabolic regulation. There's a whole lot of research, but we'll touch on some of this. Let's go ahead and move over here to this presentation because I'm going to switch this around. This research that I'm showing you here was done by Dr. Sunil Agarwal, a PhD medical scientist, grade level 4, in the medical scientist training program at the University of Washington. And this was presented at the World Health Congress on pain and the global health pathway. I'll go ahead and put this, I'm not sure if this will translate well to the television here, but what it reads is here, this was the 13th World Congress on Pain. And this was back in August. I'm going to continue to move some of these papers here to begin showing you. Here is a graph. Starting in 1967, this is a documentation of research, and I'll read the top of it. Medline indexed, I got to turn it a bit. Publications, search terms, cannabis or cannabinoids, January 1, 1966 through December 2008. Now, if you'll take a brief look here, you'll see a bar chart here that shows the level of research up to 2008. And that research has exploded greatly since then in the last 2.5 years. So this is not a lack of scientific evidence going on, it's a documentation of it. Now let's start kind of just briefly looking at the surface of this knowledge. Let me reframe this here good. A little bit of a learning curve here for me. How do I get that right? Okay. Cannabinoid receptors. There are two types called CB1 or CB1 and CB2. Now they have different locations in the body. CB1, the brain. We have 5 minutes. I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. Yeah, okay. Thank you, Lisa. I had a signal there from control booth trying to understand, and I'm on a learning curve here as a host. Okay, going back to this. Go ahead and move back to the just that. Thank you, Lisa. The brain, adipose tissue. That does say muscle. Yes, it does. Okay, liver, GI tract, pancreas. There are specialized receptors called G protein coupled receptors. CB1 receptors highly expressed in the brain. And I'm trying to read this off of the monitor. I'm not very good at this point. And I'll go ahead and jump on down to the CB2 receptors are expressed primarily in the immune cells. Immunology, you see that in T cells. You see that in the, let me take a glance over here. I'm going to grab this for a moment. T cells, B cells, the monocytes, the spleen, the tonsils. I find that one very interesting. The point to begin looking at here, this is a beginning identification here of the endocannabinoid system. And we're going to get into the key endocannabinoid system elements. Now, I'm not going to take you through absolute detail on this scientific literature because it would be at least a 3-hour seminar to get into it. But cannabinoid receptors are G protein coupled receptors. And this system of the endocannabinoid system in the human body is under tremendous desire for research by the American Medical Association, and we are prevented from that because it's classified as a Schedule 1 where no research is allowed at the federal government level. Although the legal states are in challenge of that, and there are 14 states plus the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C., where medical cannabis is legal. Soon, very soon, I hope, that the federal government will begin changing that position from a Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 so appropriate research can be done. I'll give you a picture here of what the CB1 receptor looks like. And what you're looking at is neurological fibers. These receptors consist of 7 transmembrane helios structures. Without getting very complex and scientific, this is a way of feeding back and forth and what's called retrograde neurotransmission. And I'll show that to this next one here. You have classic neurotransmission. For many, many decades, we looked at the transmission of our nerves as neurotransmitters, and we thought they had just a certain structure of transmission, meaning pre and post synaptic process. Well, now, because of this endocannabinoid system discovery and research, we have discovered that it is post and presynaptic and retrograde neurotransmission. That is a huge area of research that may have amazing, amazing scientific discoveries in healthcare, because if we have the capacity to influence retrograde neurotransmission, we have a way of understanding physiologic effects that have yet to be understood. And we'll take a look at some of them. Endocannabinoids are often produced as an adaptive response to cellular stress. That's right there is one of the reasons when people in anecdotal medicine smoke marijuana, and we'll talk about the smoking versus other methods of getting it in your body, as a way of recognizing people have a sense of well-being after they have consumed cannabis, got it into their body, those cannabinoids. It responds to cellular stress. We've got to have a lot more scientific research on this. But establishing cell homeostasis, that means the cell gets balanced out. Cannabinoids seem to have a very major role in that physiologic effect of metabolic homeostasis or metabolic balance. I'm going to read this to you before I set it back down for you to see it. Endocannabinoids affect a large number of physiologic processes, including feeding behavior. Yeah, we see it as a potential role in obesity. Energy balance. You see people who take chemotherapy, how they lose their energy because they're on the very edge of life and death with that type of toxic treatment, and chemotherapy is very toxic to the body. That's why it's able to kill cancer cells and hopefully not kill the human body. Energy balance. There's some amazing research which I will bring out here and we'll talk about in the coming shows about energy balance and the metabolic regulation by the endocannabinoid system. Metabolism, GI function, and I want to dedicate an entire show to that. I've got a couple nutritionists that will come on the show to talk about this GI function, which is still very much in the beginning stages of looking at research. Pain perception. Now, this is an arena that I'm going to spend a lot of time about because this is where it's best practice in my medical condition. And I'm wanting physicians to learn about this. Motor control and posture. I don't know much about that issue yet. We'll look into it. But learning, memory, and emotions. Well, we've recognized for a while that cannabis had an effect on short-term memory. But what they originally thought at the beginning, that you didn't have short-term memory with cannabis use, is being challenged. There are specific roles and relationships, such as an ADHD or ADD. It actually may have promise for memory retention, for short-term memory. It has to come back again to that endocannabinoid system and physiologic metabolic balancing. Research is needed. Immune and inflammatory responses. One of the things that I find absolutely amazing in this endocannabinoid system research is how it balances out the inflammatory responses. I've been on anti-inflammatory, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory medications for 35 plus years, and I'm sick of it. It's caused what's called a gut dysbiosis condition, which fortunately I managed very well, but sooner or later I will lose that ground because of those NSAIDs, is the term used, will eventually destroy the gut lining, creating permeability issues, which creates inflammation issues and immunological issues. So just taking that kind of medicine will eventually challenge my health. It already has. Cardiovascular function, reproduction, and bone formation. I'll lay that back over here for a quick look at the camera. Recenter that a bit. Recenter it. Good. So take a moment and look at that, and I'm going to quickly lay some more graphs in front of you. This, without getting too much into it, this is cannabinoid research on the rhesus monkey brain. I'm not going to be explaining it to you, but then we're also going to look at, eventually talking about, here is comparative charts and graph on the human brain. Now, CB receptors localized to pain processing areas. We're going to look at CB1 and CB2 here. I'll briefly put that there for you to kind of, if you can read it off the screen. I'm sorry I don't have it yet prepared for a direct graphic. We will have a 3-part series on this further down the road showing this. But the CB1 receptors and the CB2 receptors have different roles. So I'm going to pick it up and read them to you. CB1, I'll put my glasses on because I'm not as young as I used to be. Don't call me old either, Lisa. Okay, CB1, the para-aqueductal gray, that's part of the brain. The rostral ventral medial medulla, the nucleus rapamygus, the actinoseptic actions of cannabinoids within the rostral ventral medial medulla are primarily due to presynaptic inhibition of GABAergic neurotransmission. You know, these are medical fancy words talking about how the brain works in the different areas. The thalamus, the dorsal root ganglia, the amygdala, the cortex, all of those have CB1 receptors for cannabinoid function in the human body. CB2 receptors, the immune cells, including I can't even pronounce that word, microglia. Okay, see, medical words, even doctors have that problem. Cytokine, chemokine modulation. I think I'll have to follow Dixie's example of having a glass of water. We've got 3 minutes on the show. The dorsal root ganglion, the brainstem, thalamus, and more. The last thing I'm going to show here is some of the synthetic pharmaceutical industry chemical extractions and the extractions of botanicals. There are now a number of chemical structures that the pharmaceutical companies are trying to use, including THC, specifically for certain medical conditions. Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to come into this close. Thank you, Lisa. I want to thank you folks for being with me here today and having this opportunity and for participating in this first show. This is about the people, helping the people learn, understand, and ask questions. When it comes to a resolution, we will be firm. We will be committed to that process. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being who you are. And remember, you do make a difference. The Sustainable Resolution.
I look to see the good in men, still do to some extent. But man is not infallible, and this law lacks common sense. In a land where crops abound, tell me honestly, how we gonna find all that earth unless we make the world concrete? And criminals with guns and knives, they're used to break the peace. And the ones who are our peacemakers are too busy looking for a weed. I'm not saying break the law, my friends, but I'm American. We have the right to speak out loud about the things we need to change. Won't even let us study it to see its properties. Oh, my no. They say it's so bad it'll bring you to your knees. When we're allowed to use for pain morphine and heroin, expensive drugs that bleed our soul, I honestly don't understand.